Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our very interesting, I think, webinar series with Marisa Casablanca. Thank you, Marisa, for joining us today. We're going to be talking about E-2 and EB-5 secrets, investment strategies, and success stories. So let's give attendees maybe a couple of minutes till they join, and let's see. So, Marisa, again, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for the invitation. This is a great topic and it's constantly changing. So I'm so glad we're discussing this today.
Likewise, likewise. Okay, let me close here, a couple windows, and let's wait for our attendees to join. Okay,
Phone is off.
let's see. So we have 21 participants ready. Let's maybe give one more minutes and then let's get started.
Here is my alarm.
So, how was your summer, Marisa?
Good, very nice, relaxing. So yeah, how about yours?
Was
Good.
great. We're
Yeah,
here in Miami, living the life, hot and humid.
yes, it is.
No complaints.
The
No
best thing about
complaints.
the summer is the lack, or the less traffic.
Oh
That's the best
yes,
thing about the summer.
less traffic. Although many restaurants are feeling the pain of less traffic, less tourists, less overseas visitors, right?
That's
Be
true.
scared away by some policies.
Yeah.
And we'll see. I would say let's get started. So let me introduce myself. My name is Marco Scanu. I am the founder and, as I like to say, orchestra conductor of Visa Business Plans. I am also an immigrant. I was born in Venezuela, half Venezuelan, half Italian, and lived in both countries, Italy and Venezuela. But more importantly, I've been an entrepreneur for more than 35 years. So I've been in the trenches many times, launching, growing, and scaling businesses. And mainly, I spent my years, more than 25 years, as an entrepreneur in the food service and hospitality businesses with restaurants, food manufacturing facilities, gelato stores. That was a really sweet business, the gelato business, ice creams, pastries. And then in 2009, I migrated to the US under an O1 in entrepreneurship and then transitioned and into an EB1A. And just like many of your clients, all I cared about was my green card. So I followed my immigration lawyers, suggestions and provided what she needed for the case. And my petitions were approved. And somehow I fell in love with the world of business immigration and, more importantly, the intersection between business realities and immigration expectations that, as you know, they're like water and vinegar. They don't mix. So anyway, we're here after 16 years, of active work in the world of U.S. immigration. We've done more than 9,000 immigration business plans and related projects, but our main goal and our mission is to help attorneys win cases and help our clients get their visas approved. That is the bottom line. Now, Marisa, why don't you share with the audience a little bit about your background?
Thank you. I'm an actual Florida native, second generation, which is very strange here. And I grew up here in Coral Gables. I have more than 35 years of experience in immigration law. I started representing indigent immigrants with Catholic Social Services, so it gave me a good foundation of how important immigration is to families and not just businesses, but for everyone here in the United States. I've also had a lot of speaking engagements, not only with American Immigration Lawyers Association, but also some projects that have invited me to speak to investors, some EB-5 projects. I've written a book, I co-authored a book on immigration law for paralegals. I've been quoted in a couple of media outlets, and yeah, I love this how I was told that I'm the attorney for hard cases. I don't think anything is really hard. I think you just have to be creative. And that's what I love about immigration is every single case is different, every family is different, and that makes every case creative. And that's why I enjoy what I do. But thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here.
Thank you, thank you. And we've had the privilege of working with Marisa and learning from Marisa. And thank
Goes
you.
both ways, Marco. I've learned from you a lot too.
Well, we all learn from each other. This is a huge community. So this is the agenda for today. So we're going to be talking first about E-2 visas, USCIS versus consular processing. We're going to be talking investments, and then a hot topic, E-2 and real estate. Does it work, or is it a huge risk? Then EB-5 standalone investments, and job creation. Then we're going to be talking about a couple of interesting case studies, and then we're going to be opening the floor for a Q&A session. So let's get started. So Marisa, let's go about USCIS versus
USCIS, yeah, I'm sorry. So USCIS versus consular processing, that depends on the time we are. So for example, right now, I seriously consider the changes of status because of some issues we're having at the consulates. There has been a lot of individuals, there's been a shortage of staff at the consulates. There has also been things that we don't know until we find out from our colleagues. So for example, in some, let's say a form, if an individual puts down they're a Venezuelan citizen, even though they may be Italian or Spanish, lately we've been told that they are holding those cases. So I prefer to do a change of status for Venezuelans right now who have Italian or Spanish citizenship. So that's something that you have to investigate, not only the status of your individual, the nationality of your individual, but what consulate you're going to send them to. For example, there were 2 consulates that were open in order to entertain applications for individuals who are in the US so they wouldn't have to travel so far to their countries, and that is Mexico City and Toronto. But what was happening is Mexico City is now taking a couple of weeks, so you're sending your Indian client to Mexico and they're having vacation in Guadalajara for 2 weeks. Plus you have to consider getting them a visa to go to Mexico. So again, that depends on the nationality. Reach out to your colleagues. I have conversations with Marco too, because he has a lot of cases going on and he knows what's going on in different consulates. So that's why you not only take advantage of finding out what are the wait times, but the consular specific issues. There's some consulates that prefer some types of investments and other consulates who have a problem with other types of investments. So it's always good to look into that. And
Great.
I guess the business plans would be, yes. So you do the business plans, Marco, according to that, also taking that into account, right?
Exactly. And by the way, one of the best resources out there for immigration lawyers doing consular processing is the regional ALA chapters. One of them, you were one of the founders, right? Can you tell us more about the Latin American chapter of ALA? I love what you guys do.
Thank you. ALA has specific liaison committees, and I was on the Department of State committee. And I noticed that most of the members were part of what was called the Rome District chapter, which was the one located in London because of the expats. And I went to ALA National and asked them if we could start a Latin American chapter, Latin America and Caribbean chapter, because we already have a Canada one. And yes, I am the founding chair of the Latin American chapter, which was established already 13 years ago. And it's a great chapter to belong to. Thank you.
Yes, yes, indeed, because it's when you attend those conferences, and if you join the chapter, and you will be receiving a lot of support from other chapter members, and the listserv is, I've heard, very useful. So in fact, many of the things that we have learned about consular specific requirements and expectations has been by attending these conferences. So when we are contacted by an immigration lawyer or a client who needs an E-2 business, when the first question that we ask is, where are you filing the E-2? Why is that question important? We're number one, most in our experience, and I forgot to share quickly my disclaimer. We're not immigration lawyers. We do not pretend to be immigration lawyers. We will never provide anything that looks like or smells like legal advice. Okay. But we do have the practical experience, right, of what works, what doesn't, what gets approved, and what gets challenged or denied. So in our experience, most E-2s are processed through consulates overseas, right? US consulates worldwide. So what we have learned over the years is that when we're doing a business plan for a change of status, we're going to assume that the immigration officer reviewing the business plan is someone who doesn't have, let's say, a lot of mileage, right? Doing E-2s. They're more exposed to national interest waivers and so on, other H-1Bs or many other types of petitions, but not so many E-2s. So we like to include a very comprehensive and detailed and, let's say, longer business plan with more, let's say we go wider and deeper into an E-2 business plan when it's for a change of status. Now, when it comes to consular processing, this is where things get interesting. Because one of the things that I've learned over the years is that each US consulate it's like its own kingdom, right? So their
Absolutely.
own written and unwritten rules. So when we ask, where are you filing the case? If we hear, oh, I'm doing consular processing, where exactly are you filing this case? We keep track of consular specific requirements. Some of them, for example, for Madrid, we've been doing 3-page business plans, and we have to be really good at putting together a comprehensive plan in 3 pages. It's doable. It takes practice and an understanding of what is relevant and what is not relevant for a consular officer. Other things to keep in mind is, for example, the substantial investment, that magical number that your clients are praying to get from you, right? And that you answer, it depends. So depending on where the US consulate is located, what we learned over the years is that US consulates in, let's say, Latin America, they tend to be okay with quote unquote lower investments. But if you're doing an E-2 in London, maybe $80,000. Let me use that example. Maybe in London, that is nothing in London, $80,000. But $80,000, let's say in Lima, of course, Peru doesn't have an E-2 treaty, but let's say Colombia, right? Maybe $80,000 could go a long way. And yes, I know what you're thinking. Well, it depends on the type of business and so on. But yes, but generally speaking, the investment investment amount or the expected investment to meet the substantial requirement will depend on where the US consulate is located. Another important consideration is we've learned over time that some US consulates, depending on the business model, they prefer the businessman to show that the company is already operational, has already hired at least one staff member, and the company is already bringing revenue and so on. So it's one of those things that, again, it's consulate specific. And so it really pays to ask, other immigration lawyers, but especially join the the local chapters. You have the EPAC chapter that deals with Asian Pacific, and the Rome District chapter that deals with the Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So that's what I wanted to share regarding business plans and how we adapt the content and length and even language to the specific requirements of US CIS versus consular processing and so on.
Yes, and the good point about the investment, because it's not in the regulations. So what I've learned is basically try to get in the head of the officer and to convince them what is a commitment. I think they look at the amount to determine the commitment that you're going to make. If you're going to plop down 50,000 and you're from Dubai, no, but so that's a very good point. It's a very good point, Marco.
Good. Okay. So I think you wanted to talk about cash and inventory investment, Marisa.
Yes. Okay. So as you know, the investment can be a cash or it can be an inventory investment. So sometimes an individual will say, I've been importing to the United States a certain type of product. We can use that inventory as part of the investment. And one of the things that I also like to cover is that people think, do I have to make the investment before I get the e-visa? Put the cart before the horse. And this goes to that. Yes. So what I try to explain to them is that you can make an investment in the US without an E-2 or an EB-5, anything. But the B visa allows you to come to the US and make investments. Okay, you cannot work, but you can do that. So I explain the B. An example is you come in under the B, your friend has a restaurant, you lend him $10,000 because he's a startup, and then you give him more and more money, and then you need to be in the US to direct and develop the enterprise. So that's the way, excuse me, that's the way that it's usually supposed to plan out, but not really. So that's what you can start using inventory investment. So I always ask that, have you already started importing into the United States any products that you can use towards the investment? And that would go to the investment of inventory. You can also, of course, it can be cash or liquid funds. It has to come from the investor. So it's not that his company is investing in a company here. This is an investor visa. It has to come from the investor. Now his company abroad can pay him some money and he can transfer it over. And that's how we establish the investment. And again, going back to what Marco brought up, and then I concurred, is the amount of the investment. Again, look at it, because the officers want to make sure it's a commitment and that it's going to survive. Okay, that's very important. And then Marco, you can talk about how what is the substantial investment that you look for in the business plans?
Perfect. Yes, I love addressing this requirement because when clients ask, I use an attorney answer, which is it depends.
Yeah.
So
or the immigration answer, which is case by case.
exactly, case by case. But look, it really depends because look, the question that I ask clients is, ask them to go through these exercises and look, let's forget for a minute that you're applying for a visa. You were born in the US and you're launching this business, right? And you really want to do this business, right? Tell me, what is the required investment for you to show that you're going to be able to open and operate the business? Forget that you're doing the visa. The answer lies is tell me the real numbers if you were to open that business next week. So 50% of clients say, I don't know, I just want the visa. So that's where where we come in, because first and foremost, we're more than just people writing plans. We are business advisors. We've been doing business consulting and business coaching for more years than we have been doing immigration business plans. In fact, I started doing business consulting back in 2004. So we have clients, figure out that investment, a real number, not just, hey, I just like the idea of $80,000, right? No, a number that makes sense and that will show, that investment will allow the E-2 investor to make the E-2 entity or into business operational, right? Second, that it will have sufficient, let's say, fuel to to grow, right, and to basically create jobs in the United States and allow this company to, as I tell clients, we need to avoid, that your business plan shows that this is a one-man show. No, we have to avoid that at all costs. So that's, the substantial investment from a business perspective is show me exactly what's needed. And that's what we want to show in the business plan, what's needed, so that we can convince the officer that you're ready to open the doors to your business tomorrow. You're ready to go. You're opening a restaurant. Okay, how about the location, chairs, tables, menus, inventory, ready, you're ready to go. Website ideally, because now they're checking not only your social media handles, but ideally, yeah, let's show them that you have a website for your restaurant, and so on. So that's the approach that we use, right? And yes, we love inventory, because if you ask your CPA or accountant, they will say, no way, inventory is not an investment. It's a liquid asset. Yeah, but in terms of the E2, it counts as investment, and it counts as showing that if the business goes south, it's gonna hurt your pocket if you lose that money. In the past, we've also done very interesting cases. A couple of maybe weeks ago, an attorney said, "Oh, Marco, you are like a FAM nerd. I love reading the FAM because that's kind of the guide that consular officers are supposed to use to review business plans." So we've done cases where part of the investment is equipment. The way that it's been done is, through a CPA that puts together an independent opinion of value, saying, for example, this car is worth $50,000. We've also done interesting cases where intellectual property was part of the investment, also through a valuation from a CPA. So interesting, and as Marisa said at the beginning, the hard cases, more than hard cases, is the creative twist, making sure that we check the boxes of what's accepted.
Absolutely.
Now we wanted to talk about the million-dollar question: E2 and real estate. Does it work or run away from it?
Everybody asks me, if I buy a house, can I get an E2 if I buy a building? So this is the first question we always get, no matter from what country the individual is from or what business they're in. So a case-by-case basis, yes and no. It can be structured in a certain way. Just buying one house, definitely not. But let's say some people, especially from Latin America here in Miami, have invested in a couple of homes that they're renting out. And it can be done if by opening up a real estate management company, and then that real estate management company has clients or customers that are actually the properties that that individual owns. Because here we usually, well, we advise, most people get advised that each business or company that, property that you own be under a corporation. So basically you have a real estate management company, and that is managing 3 corporations, which are 3 homes, and that works. Now, what consulates have I tried it in? Almost every consulate in Latin America. I tried it in Dublin and it worked. So I think that with a perfect and well-structured business plan, such as Marco does, that works, that will work, because that is, remember, I always tell them, you got to think direct and develop means you're going to be working 9 to 5. Is this an investment that you're going to be working 9 to 5? And that's why you need the E visa. If not, you come in with the B, as I mentioned before. And the way you structure it to show that you're going to win the case is also, I always suggest at least one person being on the payroll. That's the person who answers the phone, who organizes and calls the plumber, the carpenter, the real estate agent, everything, to make sure that the properties are being managed correctly. And that's in real estate property management. Now, in real estate project management also, and I think Marco and I, we were talking about also with like development and some type of development of properties and things like that. That works too. But again, the business plan is the most important thing. And people will say, "Oh, I went to Wharton's and I can do my own business plan." No, I know you can do your own business plan, but you won't be able to do an E2 business plan. There has to be somebody specialized that does know how to do E-2 business plans because we need that 5-year projection and we need to convince them. And in my Dublin case, that when I sent them with the property management, they had a large building, but the officer wanted another client, another customer. Because again, as Marco was saying, we have to show that this is going to be a success. Why do you need a visa if you're going to lose all your money anyway, right? So we have to make sure that it's a good investment, it's a good business, that you know the business, because if I'm a doctor and I'm going to invest in something that has nothing to do, it'd be easy for me to invest in a clinic because I know that. So if you show that you're going to be successful in that investment, then it'll work. And that's one thing that Marco was stressing about that.
That's very, very important. And a couple of things that, how do we look at this E2 business plan for real estate businesses? The first thing is that when I hear clients say, hey, I'm doing this real estate business, we have to really pay attention, because we have to make sure that first and foremost, the business, as Marisa was saying, really requires it's going to be an active operation from 9 to 5, right? But also we ask a question, okay, is this something that you can do remotely, right? Because that's kind of the test. If client says, oh, I have 10 properties and, I'm going to be collecting rent. How are your tenants paying rent? Oh, they wire the money. So what's the difference? Why? The question is, why do you need to be physically present in the United States to run and this is the second question we ask is to run let's say, complex operations. You were saying it's about repairs, maintenance, coordinating with the plumber, with the electrician, and so on. So that's the first thing that we look at. And then once in a while we come across cases that, they look weak from a business plan perspective, because we try to be very conservative. We like you, we are about winning cases, and I am extremely competitive, and I never like to lose, never. So
Yes.
what we do is, again, we bring the consultant hat and the advisor hat, and we say, wait a minute, but tell me more about your background and what type of things have you done, as an entrepreneur or as a professional. And in many cases, we can come up with a business model where they add a second and even third line of business, right? For example, minor, remodeling projects, right? Or I hear the client say, oh, I have a lot of friends in Argentina. They're actively, looking for real estate investment opportunities. Okay, and they trust me for doing all of this. Well, okay, why don't we convert that into a business where you are an advisor, and of course we stay away from, an activity that requires a license, right? So you could be an advisor, right? Actively searching for opportunities, and you charge a fee for being an advisor, and so on. And then you can do the project management, and so on. So those are really interesting cases to work on. And since our mindset, and my mindset is, I just love fixing problems. That's my thing. So we would like to come up with creative solutions that will actually work. Because with our clients, look, remember, this is not just about getting the visa. You have to make it work. You have to show that you're actually doing what you said you're going to do. And then once you go for that renewal, you're going to have to show real numbers and real activities. So this is not about just getting the visa. Let's think strategically about 2, 3, 5 years down the road. So yes, real estate, yes, but with a lot of caution. So we're switching to the EB-5. Go ahead, Marisa.
So the standalone EB-5. So as you know, EB-5s can be indirect or direct. So indirect is your individual standalone investment. For example, I buy a factory and I create 10 jobs. Indirect is where you invest in a project that is under the umbrella of a regional center, and you make your investment into that project. And those are usually loan-based rather than the direct ones are usually equity-based because it's your project. The source of funds, it's really the only place in the regulations or the FAM that really addresses source of funds. For the E2, you do have to show the money is yours, and you have a very light type of source of funds presentation. But with the EB-5, it's very, very document heavy. You have to trace every dollar or every peso or every yen from the beginning into the project of whatever you're going to be doing. So the source of funds is the same for standalone, indirect, as well as direct. Now, retained earnings, you can't just use the retained earnings of your company in order to invest it. You have to take out the money, you have to pay your taxes on that money, and then you can use that to invest in your investment. Because we have to keep in mind the money has to be of the investor. Now, retained earnings also requires that the company or the accountant for the corporation or the company explain the retained earnings. You just can't say, I took 100,000 out of my company as retained earnings. No, you have to document, but with the information of the foreign accountant, how those retained earnings belong to the individual. They pull it out, they put it into their bank account in Argentina or wherever, or right now not Argentina, but maybe Colombia, and then that money is then invested into the project. Oh.
How about a home equity loan? Would that work?
That is very interesting. The thing about immigration is we don't really work from the code or the regulations. Is usually by memorandums, case precedent, and thank God for some of those attorneys that love to sue immigration on EB-5, and then we get good law from that. So it used to be that you couldn't, if your parents got a loan on their house and then gave you the money as a gift or as an inheritance, before, then it wasn't your money, it was not at risk. But thanks to some, colleagues, they sued immigration and they said, yeah, okay, no, that is at risk. The son can get the EB-5, even though it wasn't his money that was at risk, it was his parents who got the loan. So again, there's different ways of getting it. So it can be from retained earnings that you draw out a loan. In some countries, like in Peru, because of the taxes, they wanted their attorneys, their foreign attorneys want it structured as an advance of inheritance. Other countries, so, and that's a good point that you just brought up, Marco, you have to talk to their tax attorney because remember, this is money that their parents are giving them. Is it a gift over there? Do they pay taxes? What if the child is here as a student, or maybe they have an H-1B and then they're getting this money in from their parents giving them the gift? A tax attorney is very important to speak to about that also. So those are the things you have to consider when in the source of funds, is always talk to the foreign tax attorney, because they all have one too, and the foreign accountant, and that to make sure they speak to a U.S. tax attorney.
Exactly. Great advice. Great advice. So how do we, through the business plan, address the EB-5 investment? Of course, always we coordinate with the immigration lawyer handling the case. So we ask you, but especially if we identify any potential issues, we believe in being proactive and being the first line of defense against a potential RFE, although, death and taxes and RFEs are part of life, right? In the world of
Yes,
immigration.
very much.
But I like to always, explain that the breakdown of the EB-5 investment is like an E-2 investment on steroids, meaning we really put the source of funds and the use of funds under the microscope and break it down in a way that we can show what we believe is one of the key aspects of the business plan, which is showing the connection or nexus between the investments and job creation. That's what it boils down to. And of course, the rest of the business plan has to be credible and realistic and the matter of how. And then we think the matter of Izumi when we do the investment section. So an extremely detailed breakdown of how the funds have been used and how that would result in a credible job creation element in the business plan.
Yeah, and then we talked about this, how it's jobs, not employees. Yeah. So if you can create the 10 jobs, maybe have 9 employees, because if you can show with the business plan that those jobs are available or those jobs were created, then that's important, you know. So we always have to remember the regulations say jobs, not employees on that.
Very important. But you also wanted to talk about family members, hiring your mother, your cousin, your cat,
Yeah.
or your dog. Does that work or not?
No, it doesn't. Immigration already expected this. It's very common. Yeah, no, the short answer. And again, jobs, not employees. And what does the CIS look as far as sustaining and the job creation? They look at the payroll. There has to be the payroll. You know, that's what they look at, and not 1099s. Those aren't really, you're not really creating jobs. You're outsourcing. They're not jobs of the business that created. So, and then when you are, remember at the beginning, you haven't created the jobs, but sometimes most regional centers, they have already created jobs for their projects. But let's say you file your petition, your 526, the jobs haven't been created, right? So what is the RFE when you're going to remove the condition? Then you have to show that the money was sustained through K1s, and also the payroll to show that the jobs were created. Now that can happen also with the 526. I've had a couple of RFEs with the 526 where they say, we don't believe the job should be created. But luckily, since they take so long anyway to get approved, by the time this gets to an officer, you've already had 2 years and you can show that the jobs were created. So that's an important thing that comes up with the RFE. So be prepared to fight an RFE. So make sure that they start creating the jobs right away, and that the investment is sustained so that the shareholder or the investor can show the K1s that the investment was sustained.
Exactly. But equal important or even more important, they could be creating your job. That what if those jobs are not correctly documented? I mean, that's
Oh, yeah.
that. So because at the end of the day, the proof lies in a piece of paper that you can you can send
Yes.
to
Yes.
prove that the jobs were created. Same with the business activity. You
Yes,
know,
and one thing, that's a good point, Marco, because also remember the I-9s, because the I-9s, they're gonna look, okay, you have 15 people. Are they, can they work in the US? You got
oh
to make
yeah,
sure, and so you need the I-9s with the, supporting the fact that they are allowed to work in the US. That's a good point to bring up. Yeah.
it's super important. It's how you lawyers prove, right? Beyond a reasonable doubts that what was supposed to happen, it actually happened. What you're claiming that happened actually
Yes.
happened. So how do we address and how can we help you um, with this? So the first thing that you need always is not just a business plan that shows that 10 jobs could be created that maybe have already been created. Uh, a very important aspect is that the business plan has to be credible and realistic. It has to be, it has to stand scrutiny, and basically, we like to preemptively answer the question, where did those numbers come from, right? Because it's easy to say, okay, I'm opening this small cafe, I'm just gonna fill it with 10 employees, even though I only need three, right? So the right way to do it and the credible way to do it so that we're ready to respond with confidence to an RFEs using industry benchmarks, because we know that immigration officers, at least up until today, when they challenge the numbers, they're not, making a technical argument saying, "Oh, I don't believe in the numbers because of ABC." They just say, "Okay, your numbers are not credible." So we have to be ready to defend the numbers. That's why we make sure that every single staffing projection makes sense and we can defend and really say, okay, this is where the numbers come from according to the industry benchmarks for your client's industry. And another interesting element is when someone hires, and the restaurant industry is a perfect example. Someone hires, let's say you have dishwashers. So you have one dishwasher job, but maybe occupied by two part-time workers. right? What really counts is the one time, the full-time job. So what we do is explain clearly that two, part-time positions for one job equals a full-time equivalent. So that is also something to keep in mind. Okay, so we only have 15 more minutes. So we wanted to quickly share with you a couple of, and this is always very interesting, a couple of case studies. Why don't you share a little bit more about, or some context about this specific case that we worked on together?
Sure. When I was mentioning about putting the cart before the horse, this is the perfect example. This is a very, very well established. He's a photographer, but he's very artistic. And what he came with a B visa, it's Canadian. He came with a B visa and opened up the business, but wasn't working on it, just checking on it, putting his people there to work, and everything would go back to Canada. And then with every trip, he would open up another business in Miami, I think one in Chicago, and in different cities. And so what happened is he had four, and now he's like, okay, now I have to be. He's a famous photographer in Canada also. So now he says, oh, well, now I need to be in the US because I have four of these businesses and I have to be there to direct and develop it. As we were mentioning, you have to be present. He can't do it remotely anymore. So then what happens is we created a holding company with Marco's help, and that holding company became the holding company of the four businesses. And that's really important too, because it has more employees. And this is, like I mentioned, this is the way that is perfect, because they already had the structure. Well, he didn't have the structure yet, but he had created something that already was ready for him to get an E-2 visa. So this is a very good case that we did together. Yes.
Yes, agreed. And one of the things that we like about these type of cases is that, you you come across clients that are really active and creative, and entrepreneurs who are thinking about opening different businesses. Oh, and I want to open a restaurant now, and I want to open a flower shop next month. So this type of structure, having a holding company, again, you are the lawyers, we're not, but as long as you're okay with this structure, right? This gives your client an interesting benefit, which is, in this case, your client, Marisa, what if he closes one of these, studios, in the one in LA, for example? If his petition was tied to that specific studio, then he would have killed the visa, right? Now,
That's
through a holding company that's very active, and entrepreneurs were looking for opportunities in different businesses, they're free to close and open, as long, I know, as they coordinate with you and they get your blessing on what they can close and open and how they do it. But they have more flexibility. So I love this type of structure, as long as, again, it meets the requirements of the law, and as long as you, attorney, feel comfortable doing it. So this was an interesting one. And then we have the EB-5 urgent care case. Go away. Take it away. Sorry, I didn't say go
this was
away. Didn't mean to say that.
this is very interesting. So this individual, I'm not going to say a nationality, okay? This individual, actually, he could have done an EB-2 national interest waiver. I mean, this gentleman had a clinic open 24/7 during COVID, when a lot of clinics were closed, attending clients. And it was a great investment, great type of, and he had the staff and everything. And I kept asking him, okay, where are the funds coming from? Well, my brother gave me a loan. Okay, so we have everything. Marco's prepared the business plan, everything. And then when we get down to the source of funds, then he says, no, I really can't get this from my brother. So I don't know what was going on there about the money, because his brother wouldn't say that he gave him the money. I don't know. But this is a great lesson for me. I've never had this happen before. Been doing these, as I said, almost 35 years. But we wanted to share the experience because this was a great business plan that Marco created. We had everything, and all I needed was the source of funds. And then, it came, we worked on it what, like 4 or 5 months or something, because he couldn't get the information. And so yeah, this is a lesson for me, especially, just from the very beginning, show me your bank account. I want to see where the money is, So
Exactly. And then, yeah, he kept saying, yes, I have it, no worries. That's pressuring for the business plan. So it was also an interesting case where we used several, again, two part-time positions filling, a
the
job
nurses, yeah,
for
nurses
nurses
and
and so
doctors.
on. Everything looked perfect. But then, it's, we already know what happened.
So
So
yeah, yeah.
exactly. So what we have now is we're open for Q&A. It's 11 minutes to 1 p.m. So let's see what questions the audience might have. Okay. I'm going to read the question, which is question to the attorney. So that's Marisa. What is your experience with EB-5 when the applicants have accumulated illegal presence in the US? This gets interesting, Marisa.
Oh,
Okay,
wow.
is the only applicable waiver 245K? Then question says a person who seeks asylum and has been here for more than 180 days in the US is not eligible. So this is for you.
Um, Again, case by case, but there are possibilities. If someone comes to me and says, I came in with a tourist visa and I applied for asylum, they haven't accumulated. The first question is, did you apply for asylum before your tourist visa expired? So if they did, they have not accumulated unlawful presence, and you can move forward with the visas, and then they can counsel a process. In some situations, you can do a change of status here, but it changes all the time because you can do it in some states, but not in others. And in fact, I had a case like this, and I have a 5 friends, excuse me, that we call each other our brain trust because we all have been practicing just as long and we're all like on top of everything. And it was so funny because when I put that question out to my colleagues, I said, can we do a change of status? Someone, a tourist, change, asylum, never came. And one of them said, yeah, I got it approved, but I got lucky. The other one said, yeah, I did it and they approved it, but I don't think they should have. So basically, that is still not clear. Now, one thing that we do have to keep in mind is that TPS was codified under Biden to be considered lawful status. So you can change status from TPS, but then you have to look to see what they had before. So did they have a status before they got TPS? So if they had the tourist visa, they applied for TPS before the TPS, before the B2 expired, then, so you have to really sit down with the person. Also, remember, yes, 245K, great to have. That means if you have unlawful presence of less than 180 days, you can change status. You can use 245K. Also remember that it also existed 245I a long time ago. 245I, if a petition was filed for you before, I think it was 2001, 2001, I can't, January 2001. Forgive me because it's been a long time since then. But you look into that. And if it was, then that person can adjust status in the United States also. So there is ways to use that, it's just case by case. It's hard to answer that question generally.
Exactly. So short answer, it depends.
It
Okay,
depends.
so this is a question that I think it's an interesting question that so it says, how many times can you renew your E-2? And it says on the basis that um okay, on the basis that all that's happened, how do you put it in the business plan? So how many times can you renew the E-2?
That's a really good one too. So remember, when you file an E-2, you have to show that you will return to your country. Remember that statement of intent? I'm going to go back to my country. Here it does. But you file that statement of intent. So you what I've seen, most people can renew it for 15 years. There's a couple of consulates that will not let you renew it because they say you already don't have a statement of intent to return back to Colombia because you've already been living in the United States for 15 or 20 years. So that's something that you need to also contact your colleagues and say, what is Colombia doing? What is Argentina doing? What is Dublin doing? Because when you get past the 10 years, so remember, you usually get it for 2 years, unless they think, they may give it to you for 5, okay? But then, excuse me, it can be extended in 5-year increments indefinitely. So there's a point where you have to start checking out and telling them, do something else, do another visa, one thing that we didn't talk about, Marco, is converting your E-2 to an EB-5. So
Oh
since
yeah.
this covers E-2s to EB-5, you have to have the appropriate business plan. And that's a conversation, Marco and I have at the beginning. This person is interested in an EB-5 later. So this business plan, let's make sure that this E2, we can later be able to convince to convert it to EB-5. And that goes to this question of how long can you keep extending an E2? At one point, they have to do a green card.
Great answer, Marisa. And so quickly, how do we address a a business plan for a visa renewal? Um, funny clients say, "Oh, but you guys wrote the business plan, or someone else wrote the business plan. It's the same thing, right?" Well, no, it's not the same thing.
No.
First of all, when we look at a renewal, is okay. We begin by okay. Let's analyze what the business plan said your company was going to be doing, what your intentions were back then, right? And then show me the numbers, show me your tax returns, your financials, the staffing, tell me what actually happened versus what you said you intended to do. So we do a gap analysis, meaning, okay, this is what you said, this is what really happened, and see how wide the gap is. And of course, always in coordination with the immigration lawyer, with you handling the case, we determine if the gap is narrow or super wide, right? Uh, and based on that, we discuss a strategy with the client and the immigration lawyer, because sometimes, the what happens is this, that many of these investors work with a CPA that, of course, legally is trying to minimize taxes, which means marginal enterprises, right? Companies making a tiny profit, and these investors super happy. I only paid like $2,000 of taxes. Then we're dealing with company that is not generating more than sufficient income. So that's why the way why we launch a separate company. We do a lot of bookkeeping for E2 clients and EB-5 clients to make sure that we find the right balance between lowering taxes and making sure that we're not showing a marginal enterprise. But going back to how we approach this renewal. So the first is looking back and seeing with the attorney, have you met the requirements of the law? Have you followed your business plan, and how close have you followed your business plan? And then second, going forward, what's the plan? Are you going to be doing more of the same? Are you planning to expand into other areas? What exactly is your plan? So actually doing a business plan for a renewal in many cases is more work, because when you do the initial plan, you have no record with immigration to review, right? All you have to do is give me the information and here's the plan. Now it gets more complicated. Anyway, that's how we approach those business plans. Now, we have a couple more questions here. Um, this question is for Marco. How can you ensure that you can write a comprehensive plan in 3 to 5 pages? Okay, interesting question. We're doing that actually for Madrid. Let me remind you that Abraham Lincoln, the Gettysburg Address, had 272 words, and it lasted for 2 minutes. So I always say, we don't write business plans, we write children's books. Okay, we make it easy for the audience to really get the business. We always put ourselves in the shoes of the officer who is reviewing petition after petition and business plan. They're doing a 9 to 5. Sometimes they have a hard time wrapping their heads about really complex or unheard of businesses and business models. So again, we write it in a way that they can quickly understand and that they feel really smart because they understood the business plan right away. And quite frankly, it can be perfectly done in 3 to 5 pages. Of course, we cannot provide the level of detail that we would like to, but it's perfectly fine. It's important things to show the information that is relevant and make sure that we're avoiding, marginal enterprise and the investment is substantial and so on. So, any thoughts about this, Marisa? The length of the business plan, is it the longer the better, or what's your take?
I don't know if it's because I'm a Gen X, but I go straight to the point. Even my briefs are straight to the point. And I find that, when I've worked with, some of my associates and parallel, they write longer. And no, for me, it's all straight to the point. And especially it's a good point because some consulates, you can only give like 70 pages, which one, and that's the job I hate the most is counting the pages. Okay, can I take out the third page of the tax return, or should I take out this? And so, no, the more concise, the better it is. Absolutely, yes.
Straight to the point. So we're almost, it's almost time to say goodbye, as they say, right? So I'm going to share my screen again so that you can take here a, if you want more information, Marisa, here's the QR code. Is there anything that you'd like to share? Marisa, closing comments, remarks, thoughts?
There's a lot of stuff going on every day. Try to contact your closest friends who are practicing immigration law with you, because we all need to support ourselves right now, to support ourselves and support each other, and that everybody's going through the same thing. And so it's more important now than ever to hire professionals to do these things, such as Marco, because they're being more strict, and you have to be ready for any questions that come up or any future things. So that would be my closing comment.
That's a great tip, and it boils down to hiring the right professionals. Tax lawyers, accountants, lawyers that deal with contracts, lease agreements, franchise agreements. As I like to say, we view this as we only have one shot. That's it. This has to be done right the first time. There's no second chance, or at least we want to. Even though that in some instances, yes, there's a second chance, but let's forget that there's a second opportunity. Let's just think that we have to get it right, nail it the first time. So thank you. We're here to help. We're here to help you brainstorm and find, solutions to complex cases. And thank you for joining this webinar today. I hope you are working out of here with value, and we got you thinking about different options and creative solutions. Thank you, Marisa, again, for accepting our invitation, and I wish you a great rest of the day and a great Labor Day weekend.
Thank you. Thank you, Marco, for including me. Have a great rest of the week.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.